Once upon a time, today, we sat and discussed some more things.
Yes.
So what are we discussing this time round?
Well, this time round, we actually had a fair bit of engagement on our last video. So thank you everyone for that. We had a fair few new subscribers as well. So welcome to everyone. But yeah, we had some questions and comments on our last video. So we thought we'd answer them in a proper podcast rather than trying to respond in comments. It's just a lot easier.
Sure. Okay,
Yeah.
break it down. So we're responding to people who've been watching our content.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And let's do it.
Yeah. So you want to go straight in?
Straight in.
Okay. All right. So first question. There's actually two questions to this. One's from Kathy Wolf. So what is Mystic Society and what spiritual tradition are you drawing from?
Kathy Wolf. Or Kathy Wolf.
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 Is that my accent?
Go again. What's the question? Miss Kathy Wolf. What is it?
What is Mystic Society and what is the spiritual tradition that we are drawing from?
Okay. Where do you want to start?
Start with what is Mystic Society?
All right. So you can break it down in multiple ways. What Mystic Society is. Essentially, we had to give a name to what we're doing. So we chose a name, Mystic Society. So that name, what does that name reflect, or what does it point to? It points to a number of things. One being we are a community of cultivators who are essentially operating in our own little society, and we are mystically inclined. So that kind of says it all, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. As in Mystic Society. So that's us. At the same time, it is a recognition of the reality of an unfolding mystic society in the greater body of humanity. And what that means is, to put a long story short, we've kind of covered this before, but to cut a long story short, everything is evolving. Life is evolving always, undeniably. And it's very easy to see. If you look and pay attention, you can see life evolving. And humanity is obviously a part of that life. And we together as humanity are ready and becoming more and more ready. Some of us have been ready for a long time, and more of us are becoming ready to take the next step with regards to how we're operating here on the earth. And the future is mystical. Because mysticism is at the heart of every single human being, and by that means the same force of life that is at the heart of a mystic is at the heart of every human being. The same animating force. And it's waking up. It's evolved to a point where it's ready to move beyond the, let's say, recent interpretation of egoic operation. So the current level of human evolution, we're ready for a quantum leap. And so Mystic Society, the larger element of Mystic Society is you, the awakening humanity. And the future being mystical, that means the mystical mind evolves beyond the need for religion. It evolves beyond the need for an authoritarian imposing government. It evolves beyond the need to be told how to live. And so the beings, the individuals who are awakening their own mysticism and their inquiry into mysticism are taking the next step with regards to the evolution of the species. That is the real Mystic Society, and it is the current manifestation of an ancient lineage, an ancient tradition of mystical human beings. which leads on to, I suppose, the next part of the question, which is what spiritual traditions are we drawing from? Again, there's multiple ways to answer that question. So let's start with the truth, the absolute truth, and then we'll move on to the relative truth. The absolute truth is every single spiritual tradition, every single tradition of humanity has arisen out of the human consciousness, the human mind. Every single one of them, all of the great sages, enlightened beings, so-called messiahs of all of the different cultures and traditions have all had some kind of insight or experience in their own consciousness, which has then given rise to the development of a tradition around that being, because of the way that being interacted with the world and the things they said, the teachings as it's called. So what is our tradition? The human heart, obviously. That's the absolute truth of the situation. The heart of life is awakening. Our tradition is life itself. So that's the absolute. The relative perspective of that is what is all relevant to me, to my journey, my position in this. I encountered a Taoist warrior monk who used to be a Tibetan monk when I was 18, and I got ordained by him. And so the traditions that I have most closely associated with were Taoist and Buddhist, more primarily elements of Zen Buddhism, actually, but also including classical Buddhism like Mahayana and Theravada and other elements of more traditional classical Buddhism. Yoga too, but primarily Kung Fu, as in practical dynamic meditation, Qi work, energy work, Tai Chi, Qigong, and a lot of very deep inward peering into the consciousness, the present consciousness within one's own experience. So if you want to follow a kind of more easily understood lineage tradition, then it would be Taoism, elements of Buddhism, yoga, practical elements of these schools, not the theoretical elements, but the practical, mystical essences of these particular traditions. That's how I would have answered the question. The relative way is how I would have answered the question in the early days of my training. But having cultivated the practical elements of these traditions and pierced inwardly through their appearance and through the form of the tradition, you arrive at the same unified heart of humanity, and that's how you find mysticism. And that's why basically every single traditional school of spiritual cultivation, traditional cultivation, has a mystical dimension to it. There is obviously a theoretical and an intellectual dimension, and there is a practical dimension, and peering deeply, as deep as possible, into those dimensions, you arrive at the mystical dimension, which is unified. And there you're arriving at the heart of consciousness itself, which incidentally is also where modern theoretical physics, or the world of quantum mechanics, how science is now peering into the nature of consciousness itself, they're also arriving at the same source, the same heart, which is mystical. So mystic society is that the human beings who are evolving towards awakening are evolving towards mysticism. And so as society awakens, it will become a mystic society. So that's that.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Thanks for that question, Kathy. That was very good. Hope that did something for you. If there is any other points you want to dig into, feel free to comment below. Mm-hmm. And also another point is anyone and everyone is welcome to question and inquire into these discussions. I wouldn't call it a teaching, but there are obviously elements here that some people may not be familiar with, and so they may receive it as a teaching. And obviously, the wise and the only real way to approach a teaching of any kind is to inquire into it, to rip it apart, to question it, to analyze it, to practice it, potentially, to figure it out for yourself. And obviously, absolutely anyone is welcome to inquire, and we do welcome absolutely any inquiry. But I will say one thing. Anyone who may want to simply place their views and opinions on what we're doing, okay, you're welcome to do that, but we won't be responding to it. In most cases, we probably won't acknowledge it, even though you're welcome to do whatever you want. I wouldn't expect anybody else to acknowledge or respond to my own kind of critical, negative assessment of what they may be doing, unless I had a genuine desire to inquire, and my concerns were the kind of concerns, maybe doubts, that I wanted to explore. And so if anyone is watching these videos and wants to explore their questions and doubts or observations, there is a link down below. You're welcome to reach out to us via email. We have more than one way to initiate a kind of face-to-face discussion online with regards to any of this stuff. So yeah, there's that too. So do consider that if you want to, involve yourself in the conversation and become more deeply connected to what we're doing here by initiating or strengthening the bond and the relationship more intimately. Anyone is welcome to do that. But obviously, I would suggest that if you want to go that way, be prepared for some face-to-face encounters. If you have challenging ideas or doubts or concerns or opposing views and you want to explore them, perhaps you want to prove them to us, as in challenge. It's like a challenge, We're obviously absolutely open, and we welcome those types of discussions. But yes, let's all keep an open mind and explore this stuff together in conversation with, humility, and perhaps also a kind of gentleness and respect for
civil.
By being civil, yeah. So that's all, Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, so we had another comment from Hell on Earth.
Holy moly.
Jesus, I can relate. I'm struggling to dissolve certain eyes of judgment. I don't watch TV anymore, but when I walk in on someone watching the TV, I find myself getting angry and judgmental at the words they say, empty words just filling space. Silly binary questions and debates, lots of made-up dramas. I catch myself and sit with those thoughts, that ego, rebuking it, returning to the present and understanding that this is an old ego of mine, that I must dissolve it. I'm trying every day to work towards compassion and understanding that all our fellow humans are on their own path, etc. But at the moment, all I see is ugliness in my fellow people. I'm wondering how you go about this. Do you put yourself in situations where you have to face these eyes? Do you sit in populated areas and wait for an eye to rear up so you can observe it? It's not enough to hide away from them, people. Although part of me wants to, we must face people in order to dissolve whichever eyes rear up. Thank you for your discussions. They are a great help on this journey.
Okay, well, first of all, you are very welcome, and it's our honor, actually, to be able to have these conversations, and it's wonderful to see some people really resonating with the experience of being connected to this type of discussion. So thank you for your comment, and thank you for watching. All right, so this question obviously comes from somebody who has some experience in the world of cultivation. So let's make it more poignant and more direct. It's an overcomplication. It's an egotistical strategy to try to control the development of the I. And by the way, when that comment was being read out, the I's mean as in the capital letter I. There aren't multiple I's for a start. And this is why, the ego always overcomplicates and confuses the situation. Now the ego thinks that it needs to control the ego, the I trying to control the I, you understand? So it must be simplified deeply, and this is where the deep, more practical instruction and practical discipline comes into being. Okay, it can be a curiosity to take yourself to a place Perhaps you know this place is particularly challenging to your consciousness, and it raises a lot of instability or difficulty within yourself, a lot of turbulence. Okay, it's absolutely a part of the training to take yourself to these places, to learn to face this conflict and learn to handle more efficiently and more directly the turbulence that you experience inwardly. That's fine. It's a kind of training that you can do. However, what you will do in that space, if you were to take yourself to that place, is essentially what you should already be doing. It's not a case of being at home. And when I say it's not a case, okay, it really depends on your desire for your level of cultivation, how deep, how intense, how direct you want to be. If you are still cultivating and this crystallization of awareness has not been realized, has not been established, then you may see that you want to apply a certain amount of pressure to your life, a certain amount of focus in order to gain some ground within awareness, which is an oxymoron actually, but let me explain what that means. In order to learn to be established, to stand as awareness, established in presence, is a kind of training. It requires focus to learn how to do that, and that focus cultivates realization. It cultivates the energy of awakening. So, if you want to apply yourself in a way that establishes this focus and cultivates this kind of energy of awakening, you should be doing this all day long. To be established where you are in presence, the I, as in the individual perspective, the ego will rise up and cease unceasingly within you. Sometimes it will be turbulent, sometimes it will not be turbulent, it will be smooth. It will seem clean and clear. It will feel centered, and other times it could be disturbed by emotion or various thoughts and ideas or other people or whatever. But what you do with a clean sense of self is the same thing you do with a disturbed or a dirty sense of self. A clear, calm sense of self versus a disturbed sense of self. You are neither of those things. You are not clear. You are not unclear. With regards to the ego, the individual perspective, the individual sense of self, you are neither of those things. So it's not necessary to put yourself in those places to see the ego. If you learn to establish yourself in presence all day long, in awareness, then the movements of the I become irrelevant to you, whether it's turbulent or not. Whether your ego seems to be having a good time or a bad time is irrelevant to you. The truly clear space of mind itself, which is present awareness, is totally free and unconcerned with the movements of the ego. So if you're establishing yourself in that place of cultivation, in that space of cultivation, you don't have to do anything about it. You're watching, and you're learning to watch. Even the movements of the ego you may watch. However, given your particular comment, things like repulsion, looking at humanity and seeing it as disgusting or repulsive, is also a movement of the ego. Now, what you want to do about that is up to you. If you see that your ego is holding on to hatred and judgment and views of how people should and shouldn't be acting, recognize that that's an error within you. That's not an error within other people. That's an error within you. You don't know these people. You don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And if you did know, you wouldn't have the judgment, because you would realize that that's you doing that. They are in the same place as you. They are going through the same process as you. They are learning. They are evolving. And they are potentially walking through hell at the current moment. And what you are witnessing is a manifestation of the hell that they are in. Why would you judge that? They're working their way through it. They might be making the situation worse for themselves, but it's impermanent. It won't last forever for them. They're learning, you know. So you wouldn't hold on to the judgment. So that's the error. The error is within the way that you're operating within yourself, within the consciousness of your own body and brain, holding on to your views. And obviously, if you're serious about spiritual awakening, you have to rise above the views that you hold. It's not about changing the world and making other people do what you think they should be doing. Of course, that's a dictatorial ego. That's the controlling again. So one would recognize that there are still these views that are more habitually clinged to and grasped to, and so you would strengthen your own resolve to stop feeding those views within you so that they can be abandoned. And that's where the training element would come in. And of course, you could take yourself to a particular place where you know these people are and cultivate compassion for them. Cultivate a different view if you want to, but that's still a view, isn't it? It's a more direct and fundamental form of practice to just recognize that the view you have is incorrect. Right now, here, there is an impersonal unfolding of the matter of life, which includes the bodies and all of the earth and the whole of the species. And it's happening directly now in present awareness, in which there is nothing really to be done about it. Instead, you are a partner to it, like you are holding the hand of the present moment while it's experiencing what it's experiencing. That includes the body, this body, that body, everybody. So to learn to establish yourself in that perspective, which is not a view, that's a perspective, would naturally eradicate any view that would try to hold on. So anyway, these questions are very good, very deep. They can be broken down in many ways, and many things can be pointed out about them. The best way to approach this is obviously engage and have the conversation yourself if you want to. If you want to reach out to us so that these points can be inquired into more immediately. Anyway, however, that was a good question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Do you think we covered that one for a bit?
Yep.
Okay. Hell on earth. Let's cultivate heaven on earth, shall we?
Okay, so in our last video, we briefly touched on non-duality, and we have a comment from Aquarium Life going further into that. So it always confused me, this non-duality self-realization just by meditating. How about others that need help? Shouldn't we focus on them, our thoughts, our prayers, if you will? Or you just think about nothing, nothingness, silently await for inner evolution. Where does the collective consciousness fit in? I'm trying to heal my inner self, but guess what? It isn't working very well, considering the world that we're in and what's happening. So basically, what a lot of people say is, don't think about it. It will go away or stop or fix itself. Really? I mean, could very well be, but it's not working for me.
Okay, so there was a lot of points raised there, a lot of elements to the question. If we're talking about non-duality and the whole point of non-dual inquiry, there are many truths about the non-dual nature of life, and there are many things that awaken. There are many elements of life that awaken through non-dual inquiry. First of all, fundamentally, there is no duality. That's the point of non-dual. That's the point of the term non-duality, not two. What is perceived as self is the whole. What is perceived as one's self is the whole, is part of the whole. There is no separation, so there is nothing to heal. Non-dual inquiry and the instruction about direct observation, direct inquiry, which means looking into the current manifestation of one's own consciousness, one's own being, the present awareness of one's own experience. Through that method of watching, that means of watching, one awakens to the fact personally, and by personally I mean experientially, one experiences unavoidably the truth of non-duality, the truth of oneness. One sees that one's body and one's experience of life is the same thing, and that what we call experience is shared. Part of that experience is the thinking process and the perceptions of the body, which are shared. Those perceptions are shared. There is no separate self. So in terms of healing, there fundamentally isn't anything to heal, but the discomfort and the anxiety and the stress that one experiences when one believes oneself to be separate dissolves through non-dual inquiry. Some people call that healing. But actually, the discomfort is established on an illusion. When you see thinking happening, and you see that only in the thinking is there a belief of a separate entity, it is very obvious to you that that is not real. And so, while you are stuck in it, the experience was that you believed the thinking and thought that you were separate. And so you were apparently confined to that process of thinking that you are a separate entity. But through non-dual inquiry, which is about stepping back into the foundation of present experience, witnessing the happening of present experience, you see that the thinking is just a part of that whole experience, and the whole experience is shared. And so you step out of the confines of the thinking, and simultaneously you see that you have never been separate. That's the whole illusion element of it. You've never been confined. You can't be confined because there is no separate self to be confined to. The belief, to fall into the trap of believing that you are separate, is a natural part of the journey that consciousness goes through, which is why we refer constantly to evolution. As consciousness evolves out of the dream of separateness, it awakens to its true nature, which is not separate. What that does is, as more people wake up to that reality, the whole species evolves. So it's not a personal problem that you have. It's the problem of consciousness, and it's totally natural and normal when a species has only evolved up to a certain point in life, in the greater picture of life's unfoldment. Young species experience a sense of separateness for a long time. They experience collective egoic consciousness. All right, so we just experienced a little bit of an interruption here with our power. It's very interesting, operating a lifestyle between multiple vans with multiple power sources and sharing our life, sharing our resources. But obviously that raises some challenges, doesn't it, along the way? All right, so getting back to the point. Regardless of what other people are saying to you, so getting back to the comment from Aquarium Life.
Yeah.
Okay, some people are telling you, just leave it alone, it'll sort itself out.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Here's the thing that can be difficult to get around with regards to some of this non-duality stuff. There are a lot of wrong modern, like there are with everything. There are a lot of, when I use the term wrong, I don't want to say, let me rephrase that so that people don't take this incorrectly too. There are shallow ways to understand things and there are deep ways to understand things. Then there is experiential awareness, which is different from understanding. The idea with non-duality is not to understand anything at all. It is to directly experience the non-dual nature of creation, the non-dual nature of experience, the non-dual nature of one's own life. It is not about understanding. So forget about what you may or may not understand or what you think people may or may not understand, and ask the question, do I know the practice, the non-dual inquiry? If I want to cultivate the non-dual way, which is a very direct witnessing, a very direct observation and awareness of it, inquire into that, raise that question within yourself, and inquire into that. Do I know how to witness life directly? If you do, establish yourself there and watch what happens, and watch wisdom, peace, and watch enlightenment flourish. If you don't know how to do that, then you must raise this question and inquire into it and receive instruction or figure it out for yourself as to what is this nature of inquiry. And I'll give you a hint. Also, bear in mind, you're free to reach out more intimately if you want more direct instruction, but I'll give you a hint to get you started. What is happening in your life that is not intellectual? The answer to this question is not, you're not supposed to come up with an intellectual answer. Without coming up with an intellectual answer, look for what is happening in your life that is not intellectual experience, and learn to stay there. When you find the part of your own life, your own experience that is not intellectual, learn to abide there. And that is what people are trying to hint at when they say, don't think about it. It'll sort itself out. What that means is, if you can learn to establish yourself in the part of you that is not intellectual, from there, the energy of awakening wakes up. The natural result of living in that way is to be fully awake to the consciousness of life, which is forever awakening. It is not that I wake up, and this is where it gets very confusing for a lot of people. And they say things like, nobody wakes up. And you want... I try not to put any judgment on this, but people go around in circles, round and around and around, when they say, I'm suffering, I have this problem. People come with these questions, and the only answer they get is, there's no you, there is no you to suffer. How does that help? How does that help the one who on the inside perceives themselves to be? It doesn't make sense to that part of you. So, although that may be appropriate for some people occasionally to have this direct, there is no you to suffer. That may be appropriate sometimes. For other people, it's absolutely inappropriate to try to communicate non-duality, the reality of non-duality, that way. They need to be pointed in a different way. So, another thing to be clear, and this is just part of the hint, again, if you want to go into it more in depth, feel free to reach out. But the reason you're encouraged to look into your present experience of life, the part of your life that is not intellectual, is because within the intellect, within the confines of thinking, exists apparent duality, a perception of oneself and others and other things. The brain has categorized and compartmentalized life into infinite objects, different objects. It does that because that's how it operates, via memory. That's how it understands what things are, via memory. This is why it's beyond understanding. The only way to understand an object is to take a photograph of it, which we call memory, and then compare it to other photographs of other objects. Otherwise, you won't understand anything at all. So you can understand that an apple is an apple because you know it's not an orange or a banana or a strawberry. Now, you might not realize you're doing that logically, but that's how your brain is operating. You understand an apple because it's different from the tree that it came from, and it's different from the person that's holding it. So your brain is, via taking lots of photographs, fragmenting reality up into lots of things. Now, that's only happening inside the brain. Now, that's not a dualistic experience. Everyone is doing that. It's the same for everyone, which is why that's not non-dual. Sorry, that's not duality. That's still a unified, non-dual reality that's doing that. But if you're in that fragmented process, you see lots of separation, lots of objects that are separate from other objects in the memory, and it happens so fast, it's hard to realize that that's what it's doing. Whereas the very second that you step out of that fragmenting process, you're in the oneness. You've stepped directly into the oneness of life. Now, if you learn to stay there, all of the illusions that were being upheld by the thought process and the perception of separateness in the brain, all of those illusions dissolve. If you can stay out of it long enough, and that's why it's called training, and that's why it's called the process. So there's a little hint. You are probably going to have to, and here's another point, there's a reason that this is quite tricky to talk about, because it's potentially likely that you're going to have to really consider this over a long period of time, and that learning to look at your life in this way is going to raise other questions and have another kind of effect, or many other effects on your life, which you're going to want to communicate about. You may need support. So if you really want to break this down, if you really want to penetrate it, again, you have the option, reach out, or ask more questions if you want to, and we can continue to go into it with you. Does that cover it, do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to say about it, about your own? I know you're not too familiar, you have not been too familiar with the traditional tradition, the traditional culture of non-duality. But you've begun to inquire into it specifically because, well, I've been talking to you about it, and because other people are talking about it via the comments. So do you have any of your own questions or insights that you want to get into, or that you think could be helpful to this conversation?
Yes. So when I was kind of doing my own research and research with you, and earlier you kind of call it like shallow understanding or potentially a deep understanding, but there is this shallowness online with talking about non-duality. And I feel like when I've watched these videos, to say what you said earlier about no one is suffering. There's no one here to suffer, when there's people quite clearly sitting there suffering. I feel like it minimizes that person's experience. Or
Let me jump on this. Okay?
Yeah, can you help?
Yeah. There is no one here. There is tremendous life everywhere. Magnificent, unified, powerful life everywhere, as all forms. And that life manifests as many forms, obviously. And those forms experience varying degrees of stress. anxiety. Those forms come into being and will die. Within those forms is because of the way the brain operates, because of the level of evolution of consciousness within this species, there is an operation of an apparent self inside the brain. That thing is what suffers. But there is no one doing that. To just say to somebody that there is no one suffering is useless. And all that does is the brain will grasp at that statement and then start to try to apply the concept of no one doing this to everything else. And the conclusion that it comes up with is that nothing is happening and that there is nothing. Because there is no one doing this, and yet there is a sense of a me and I think I'm here, then really there is no table, and really there is no earth, and really there are no other people. So that's the intellectual interpretation of the statement that there is no one doing this, which is not true. That recognition that there is no table, there is no earth, then what experiences the apparent separation? What experiences the apparent awakening from separation? What is here materialized and manifested as infinite variation of forms, bodies? What is the life of consciousness itself, if there is nothing? So the ego's intellectual interpretation of the reality that there is no one here is not the truth. That is the ego's grasping at emptiness. So it is a waste of time, and what that does is it generates a lot of very, very disturbed egos that are all in conversation with each other about how there's nobody having a conversation with each other. And so the conversation goes around and around in a circle, and I offer no judgment to these people. This is pure observation, but if you need proof for this, please go and watch a neo non-duality, neo meaning this new radical interpretation of what non-duality is. Go and watch a Zoom call with 3 or 4 or 5 people trying to have a conversation with each other, and witness the never-ending roundabout of how no one is suffering. What does that do for humanity? What does that do for the collective evolution of the species towards peace and intimate union and helping each other and addressing the problem of a world that is dominated by a corrupt and insane ego? It is merely a step into realization. To step into realization, of course, the ego begins to grasp at the realization that there is no one here. And without being too oppositional to anyone, you can listen. If you have insight and experience into the way of realization, and you know the process of it and how you step back continually, your insight and realization deepens as you step further and further back, and as you abide more fully in realization as it's unfolding. The realization of spirit into matter. You know that at certain points there is a little awakening to a principle, an element of truth, and one recognizes something. Now the ego will grasp hold of that and start trying to tell everybody about it and express lots of views around it. And the arising of that ego creates new barriers to what would have been a continual awakening to the realizing nature of life, the realization of awareness coming into being, the matter of life coming into being within awareness, which is realized. That is a process of realization, how the immaterial, the nothing, materializes as something or everything. It is realized. Anyway, so a lot of people have gotten stuck in this interpretation of it, this egotistical interpretation of it, and they're talking about how nobody is talking. Nobody is talking, then who the hell is having the conversation? If nobody is talking, what the hell are you talking about? And this is why it's very dangerous and very tricky, because you can't have a rational, logical, connected conversation with somebody who thinks they are not talking while they are talking. if you want to understand or to witness the very definition of insanity, have a conversation with somebody who is going to tell you that no one is talking. But they'll be talking to you the whole time they're saying that no one is talking. And that is an obvious demonstration of the insanity of how the ego completely blinds the truth of the situation. No one is talking really means there is no separate self here having a conversation. Don't grasp at the term no one thinking that no one means that there is nothing. There is no separate self having a conversation. But a conversation is happening. Material bodies are formed here. If there is nothing in existence anywhere, how are you watching this video? Are you aware of a transmission and a communication that is happening right now through the screen that you are watching this video on? Clearly there is something here. So, how did we get onto that? Oh, because you raised the point.
Yeah, I just thought that it kind of minimizes the experience that a person is having if they're suffering and they're coming to these people with their suffering.
Right.
Who's suffering? No one's here suffering.
Right. You know what this is like? Imagine that you're standing out in a field with a master of archery and you want to learn how to do archery. And so the master teaches you this, okay? He says, take the bow here. You hold the bow in your hand and he says, look at it. Look at the nature of this bow. Look at how the string is taut at a certain degree, taut as in tight. It has a certain level of tightness. Look at the material of the bow and how it flexes. You haven't even picked up the arrow yet. The material of the bow flexes. Okay, let's talk about form, stance, posture, breathing. You haven't even picked up the arrow yet. Okay, the process evolves. He gives you the arrow. He says, don't shoot it. Don't shoot it. Just look at the arrow now. Put the bow down. Look at the arrow. So you're dissecting all of these elements of realization, the nature of body, the nature of consciousness, the nature of thought, the nature of emotion, the nature of energy, the nature of mindfulness, the tradition of spiritual awakening, mysticism across the face of the planet, the bow, the arrow. Now we start talking about non-dual, the awakening to the non-dual nature of life, which is the target that's 1.5 miles away. And so you learn just the whole element of the cultivation, and you're aiming and you're shooting and you're missing all the time. But, you keep refining it and eventually you hit the target. And you know what's happening at the moment, masquerading as a deep realization or masquerading as a complete lifestyle, a complete holistic cultivation of collective consciousness. This is masquerading as that. Is you've got a lot of people standing 1.5 mile away with an arrow in their hand, stabbing the target, saying, look, there's nobody doing it, stabbing the target. Okay, that's fine. But I need to learn how to stand here in presence and master the skill of archery. So I need to know about the nature of the bow and the nature of the arrow. And I need to learn how to stand and be still in the wind, and when the wind picks up, and I need to know how that's going to affect my arrow. But everybody is just running to the target with the arrow in their hand, stabbing it. There's nobody here. Maybe that was a silly example, but that's what people are doing. And it's a very, again, without judgment, it's not a case of judgment, but the reason that it is a very powerful and energized topic is because many beings get carried away for years and years and proliferate and propagate this illusion, and they hijack the deep and real, the reality of the non-dual nature of life and the tradition of non-duality. And not only that, unfortunately, but they also, and again, if you need evidence for this, you can listen to some of the messages that they share. They also bastardize and criticize and diminish the real method, the real model of the non-dual lifestyle. There are many, many great masters out there. Even today there are. And it's not a case of saying that non-duality is invalid, because it's absolutely not. But there is a movement of what is called Neo-Advaita, Neo-Non-Duality, which is self-proclaimed radically interpretive. That is essentially, its message is in complete denial that consciousness even exists. That a being goes through a process, that there is a being, that there is an energy of life, that there is a process of awakening, that suffering is real, and that it's possible to get stuck in suffering, and that there's also a way out of suffering. Instead, it's just in total focus on the target with the arrow, stabbing the target. Okay, that's all that's going to teach you how to do is replicate. So now you can run up and stab the target. But you have no idea what the bow is even made of, or what the arrow is made of. How did the arrow come into being? Who made the bow? Who's the master standing on the field, teaching you about these things? So it is very minimizing. Anyway, that's just an observation. All right, so let's pick up this whole non-dual means of non-dual inquiry and break it down a little bit for people. The whole point of it, this is to understand, you've got to understand the objective, you know? Like, what's the point of a means of cultivation or a method of cultivation? It is to cultivate something. That's why it's termed cultivation. What do you cultivate? A seed into what? Into fruit. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a fruit of the practice. There's a goal to the realization. There's an objective. So non-dual inquiry, to approach life via that means of cultivation, means you want to cultivate your awakening, or to cultivate awakening to the true nature of life via the tradition of non-duality, Advaita Vedanta. So let's look into it for a minute or two. If you could look directly at your life, the experience of being itself. And when I say your life, I'm not talking about the life you've lived up to now, the memories that you have, not the journey of your life. I'm talking about the direct experience of being here, the actual living force, which you call my life, which is taking place right now. If you could learn that that is where you operate, that is where your life is taking place. And when I say learn, I don't mean understand. I mean begin to operate your life from the ground of experience itself. From direct present experience. If you could learn to guide your attention and guide your focus and operate your body and operate mind and operate your intellect, here you would be operating in that which is non-dual. You would be operating as that which is non-dual. Consciousness itself, which is intimately connected to absolutely every atom in creation, with no exclusions. From that place, you will see how this consciousness falls into the illusion of a sense of separateness via the memory processes of the brain. But you will know that there is nothing separate. There is no separation anywhere. And because there is no separation, there is no getting lost. There is no awakening to non-separateness, because there has never been separateness. However, that's kind of I'm getting a bit too far ahead of myself when I start to talk about that stuff. So let's keep bringing it back. To establish yourself presently, and by yourself that means awareness, attention, focus, thinking. operation of the body, the movements of the form, the interactions of the form, the body, with the external environment. If your life was taking place immediately here, and one is operating clearly in this space of present awareness of life as it's happening, there is absolute clarity over what is real and what isn't. And by what is real, I mean the body of life, how the spirit is living via the matter, everywhere, all at once. And by unreal, I mean how the contents of the thinking are illusory and dependent on an individual, only exists within the brain of one body, one's own personal memory of a past and hopes and wishes for a future only exist inside the brain, and are therefore, the contents of them are like a projection or a virtual manifestation of consciousness, a thought. They are only contained in a thought. The thought is real. The experience of thinking is real. Obviously, the consciousness is thinking. But the content of thinking is illusory. It's formed via the processes of illusion. That's the objective. That's what it's all about. It's not anything else, and it's not complex. So what do we have to do then? Well, it was already explained. Learn how to train to operate one's life from here. What is meant by here? The life force that is flowing through all of the senses of the body is flowing through every sense of every body everywhere. So if one is awake to this experience, one is awake to the experience of everywhere. Within one's own present experience is everywhere that is here. That is the definition of here. The definition of here is everywhere present. Merely that one would learn to abide in and as the whole energy of one's own experience, not just the content of thinking. That's a very complex way of saying, get the fuck out of your head. Get out of your head. For a while. With all of the imaginings of life inside the brain, and all of the fantasies of human tradition and culture and memory and religion and science, theory. Get out of there and get into the body of reality itself, not the psychological interpretation of the body of reality. That's it. It's not complicated, but it's a challenge, and it's a challenge to everyone. It's a personal challenge to you. Should we hashtag it? The latest trend on TikTok. The latest challenge is to get out of your head. And in that space, which is out of your brain, and it's not like it's not happening in your brain too, but, just get out of it for a bit. It's called getting out of the forest to see the trees, rising above the forest so you get the perspective of the whole forest instead of being so lost in it and not being able to see the entirety of the forest. And we'll round it out here, but another contemplation, we briefly brought this up the other day, If you are an individual on the earth at the moment, wherever you are, and you look outside, is it nighttime or is it daytime? So from your point of view, it's nighttime. And obviously that's absolutely true. Or it's daytime. You look outside, either it's daytime or it's nighttime. And you'd have to be an idiot to try to deny that. If it was daytime and the sun was shining, then it's clearly daytime, you know? So from your point of view, this individual point of view, it's either day or night. It can't be both at the same time, surely. And day turns into night. So you have this duality, clearly. From the individual perspective, there are lots of other beings and all sorts going on. But if you jumped out of that body and looked at the earth from space, it's simultaneously day and night at the same time. It's not two different things. Half of the earth is in darkness and half of the earth is in light at the same time. So it's one. Daytime and nighttime are two sides of the same coin. The head of the coin is not separate from the tails of the coin. So all of the individual interpretation of experience is based via that individual perspective, which is that's the only way for the brain to operate. The brain does not exist outside of your skull. So the brain is the center of the individual's perspective. And so if you base your interpretation of life on the individual's perspective, which means the brain, of course, it's a sense of separation in there. It's a sense of being an individual, because the brain only has one person's point of view. It's really logical and obvious when you see it for what it is. So if that's how you've been living, and instead you want to cultivate another perspective, the perspective of the totality, then you have to get out of the individual's perspective of the brain, which is what mindfulness is for. That's what meditation is for. That's what direct watching is for. And in that place, one intimately senses the oneness of all life. People call those things synchronicities, because it's like life is meeting itself. How come that body can have a thought and this one can speak it?
All the time.
Right. How come a thought can occur in that brain over there, but this one has a thought and then speaks it, and it's speaking the thought of that brain? Right. People call that synchronicity, but actually it's just the truth. It's one. It's one being operating through multiple bodies. And so as the being, the body, the person, the individual begins to operate more in the energy, consciously operate in the energy of presence, with other bodies that are doing the same, the oneness is recognized. It sees itself, it senses itself, it remembers itself. And that is called love. And that is the true condition of all of life. And yet the individual, to follow the illusory perspectives of the brain and the sense of individual, is what generates war, the opposite of love. Hatred for one another is where that leads. So clearly you're either going in one of two directions. And it's kind of funny that you can say that when life is non-dual, isn't it? It really is kind of funny that you can say that. You're either going in one of two directions in reality. Yeah? Anyway, try to get your head around that one. Alrighty, so I think we've got one more question, do we?
Yes, we've got one more question from To the Moon. So, how do you relate to the inner bliss love state? Is that something you think is worth for people to achieve? I find myself wanting to frantically help everyone else, but always come to the realization that if I want to help the world, I must first help myself. At the end of the day, one only has one's experience of this reality. If that doesn't feel good, we seek outward. How would you connect that to actually going out to actively create karma in the external world?
Bliss. It's really interesting that bliss is built into the structure of mind. The substance of mind, sorry, not the structure. The substance of mind, bliss. So naturally, as one liberates that mind, and that means one puts down a lot of the illusions of life and allows mind to return to its origin, and one returns to the origin of mind origin. It's very pleasant, it's very blissful. Sometimes it's very painful as well, but pain transforms into bliss often. It's not necessary to seek those things, and often it's unrecommended. It's not recommended because one can get addicted to it. And so rather to allow these states to materialize of their own accord is what is most recommended in the deep schools. The totality of a being, the whole point of spiritual awakening is to awaken as a total life. Includes everyone, includes everything, includes the whole, what they call the multiple, many layers and dimensions of consciousness itself, to the oneness of it all. Unavoidably, every element and every inch of it, all of it. Bliss will happen, pain will happen, intimacy, connection, experiences of connection, where the body is surrounded by people. Other times it won't be. Other times it'll be alone. All of it, the whole range of experience of life. If one is not awake to the entire experience of life, then one is not awake. At least to some part of you, you're still asleep to, you know. So why? It's not necessary to place so much emphasis on one element of life, whether that be, and this is why, let me finish this sentence. Let me finish the new sentence before I finish the original sentence. This is why there are so many different forms of advice. Go and be alone. No, don't go and be alone. Go and be surrounded by other people. Leave society and go and live at a monastery of spiritual cultivators. No, don't do that. Stay in society and go and work and be a normal person. Cultivate the energy of bliss and focus on that. And no, don't do that. Just learn to walk in presence. This is why there are so many fragmented offerings. Is because within the whole domain of the being of consciousness, experiencing life, is all of those things. And so no matter what you focus in on, you're focusing in on life, clearly. Help people, don't help people. Help yourself, don't help yourself. Noodles, don't noodles. You know? For those of you who are deeply immersed in the modern interpretation of enlightenment. There's no right answer, and there's no wrong answer. However, it doesn't matter what little bit of life you focus in on and hone in on with all of your attention. If you pick the tiniest, smallest atom of creation, and focused in on it so intensely you would pop out, you would pop through it, and you would arrive at the entire cosmos on the other side of that. It's a circle, you know. It doesn't matter where you look, it's everywhere. So we can simplify it. Wherever you are, whatever is happening, whatever is unfolding right now in this very moment of your experience, are you totally with it? Are you completely here? Is there somebody to help? Feel free to help them. Are you alone? Feel free to be alone. Are you comfortable? Feel free to be comfortable. Are you uncomfortable? Feel free to be with being uncomfortable. Feel free to make yourself comfortable. Do whatever you want. And through the witnessing and the watching of this unfolding and the evolution of this life, you will learn how to flow through all experience. And if you are totally here with the experience will always be returned to you. And what I mean by that is, any suffering, any stress, any horror, any fear, any darkness, any sense of isolation that is encountered in the world will be returned to love if you are totally here with it. That's it. Isn't it a curious question as to why all of the great masters, the great sages, the great enlightened beings of old professed their deep compassion and love for life and abided in and expressed that as if they were that force of care and attention? Isn't that funny? Isn't that a curious mystery as to why that is? Where do you think you're going with this? You want to run away from life? You want to hold on to some of it and not the rest of it? Or you want to do this bit but not that bit? Just look around at all of the various ways that life manifests. And whatever you encounter in the moment, here in your life, be with it, fully be with it. And what is meant to be will be. There's no problem. Imagine if the worst thing that could possibly happen to you is that you died. And then when you die, you wake up from that death and you realize you didn't die. That's the worst thing that can happen to an individual, is that they disappear. And when it happens to them, they actually come on the other side and realize they didn't even disappear, really. It was an illusion, the whole experience. So why run from it? Why fight it? Why live a miserable existence in terror and horror and anxiety? It's a trip. It's a dream. Be with it. Enjoy the ride. It could all be over in a heartbeat for you. If 1 million people watched this video, I don't know the statistics, but I'll pick a random number. 3% of them won't be alive tomorrow morning. Maybe not that many. I don't know. 0.3% of them won't be alive tomorrow morning. Isn't that a weird thought? What would you say to that person? Enjoy it. Relax. So it's important to simplify. If you want to be real, you really, really want the real school of awakening, it's important to simplify it. Very important. Because you will overcomplicate your life for 50 years and then you'll die. And it's a waste of time. Get to the point. Stop running from experience. Stop controlling experience. Unfold with experience itself in the moment and love it. Love it to death. How simple is that? But, okay, let's not ignore and let's not minimize the reality of a learning being, okay? Learning this, wanting to establish this, wanting to step into this lifestyle with consciousness. Okay, all right, you've got some homework to do. Great, get to work. And don't stress over it, because adding too much pressure and too much stress is counterproductive. Remember, the goal is deep relaxation. So what are you going to do? Force yourself to relax? It's not going to work. Let go of even trying to relax. Just relax. So, keep it simple. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. A good reminder.
All right, so is there anything else to be covered? Is there anything else to be brought up? Are there any other points we would like to make? Yes, I have one. We are currently establishing a kind of meeting room through something that I think is either called Whereby or Whereby, and it's very similar to Zoom. Essentially what it is like a live kind of camera-to-camera meeting room that you can jump into and have conversations in. There will be a link down below. If you are inclined and you would like to potentially have a conversation, obviously you can reach out to us via email. At the same time, though, if you're brave, if you're a bit courageous, there's a link down there to Whereby or Whereby. And what it does is it takes you to the room online, and I think there's like a button where you press knock. Now, if we're online at the time when you do it and we're here and we hear a knocking, we may answer for you and we may have a conversation. We may say hello. So yeah, there's a link down below if you would like to potentially check that out. And of course, that link will be used for anyone who reaches out and intentionally wants to have a conversation around any of this stuff. So that's there, down there somewhere. Anything else?
No, I think that's it. That's all the comments that we needed to go through. So,
Mr. Ryan, any comments? Anything you would like to raise? Any points you would like to explore?
Not right now.
Alrighty, then, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you for being a part of this. And I guess we do hope that we will see you again in another video.
yes.
Very soon.
Very soon.
Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
For now.